Lina stood under the glass dome, where the market always smelled of spice and frying oil. The dome made a small world of its own. Traders shouted, children ran. Drones drifted like lazy insects. Lina held a small metal cup. Her hands were scarred and steady. She watched the crowd and tried not to think about hunger. She did not sing for joy. She sang to make people look. She sang the old tune her grandmother had taught her. The tune had no name now. It was a pattern of sound that fit into the cracks of the city like light. Lina did not know why the tune felt important. She only knew it fit in her mouth like a key. The first notes were thin and unsure. Lina closed her eyes and let her voice find the shape of the song. Her voice was rough and bright, like river stones. People slowed. A child pointed. A trader leaned on his stall and listened. The city noises moved around her voice, but the tune cut through. A security drone turned its lens. It hovered nearer and hummed low. Lina felt the small hairs on her arms stand up. She kept singing. Her mouth moved in the way her grandmother had shown her. The song rose and fell in steps that made the skin on the back of her neck tighten. Above the dome, an old antenna blinked. It had been dark for years. When Lina reached the second line of the song, the antenna blinked in time. A single light blinked back at the tune. No one near Lina at first noticed. Then a small tremor ran through the glass. A tray of cups clattered. A woman dropped a spoon. The drone stopped and listened. Lina finished the phrase she had hummed 100 times as a child. The last note hung in the air like a held breath. The dome seemed to answer by holding all sound for a long beat. Then something clicked in the metal below the market. A rusted door on the far side of the dome that had not opened in decades showed a thin line of light. The light moved like a slow smile. Tiny lamps along the door lit in a pattern. The lights matched the rhythm Lina had sung. A voice came from a speaker by the door. It was machine calm and old. Signal recognized, it said. The words were not loud, but they had weight like old coins. People around Lina froze. Rumors grew fast. She called something. Someone said. No, she remembered a key. Another voice whispered. A man in a provincial uniform stepped forward with a face that tried to be kind and a badge that tried to be law. He put a steady hand on Lina's shoulder. Miss, he said, do you know what you did? Lina shook her head. Her grandmother had hummed that tune at night to keep her small brother from crying. Lina had thought it a lullaby, nothing more. Now the man's hand felt as heavy as a question. The rusted door opened a fraction more. Metal sighed. From inside came a smell like oil and old books. The speaker spoke again. Awaiting response, it said. The words echoed into the dome and touched every ear. A child in the crowd began to cry. The noise spread like a small wind. People pushed forward. Some wanted to see a miracle. Some wanted to take advantage of fear. The uniformed man lifted his voice to call for calm, but his call sounded small under the new hum in the air. Lina felt the cup in her hand tremble. Coins inside clinked. She thought of the nights when her grandmother's hands would press the tune into her palm. She had never imagined the tune would reach metal or sky. Above the city, a faint glint moved in orbit. Lina could not see it from the ground, but something in the dome reacted as if the sky had leaned closer. The lights on the antenna blinked faster. The market's power grid hummed. Across the city, other old machines began to stir in slow, careful ways. A woman with tea-stained fingers slipped through the crowd and stood near Lina. Her hair smelled of lavender and old worry. She touched Lina's other shoulder and whispered, You sang the lost line. You woke a thing that remembers us. Lina looked at her and asked, Who remembers us? The woman did not answer with words. She only looked at the blinking door, and then at the sky. Her eyes were not kind, but they held a strange, fierce pride. All of it, she said at last. All of it remembers now. The uniformed man made a decision with the same quickness as a blade. He turned to Lina and the others and said, You will come with me. For your safety and for the cities. His voice tried to be warm, but the crowd's fear made his promise sound like a command. As they walked away, the dome's glass shivered once more. The rusted door sealed its smile, and the lights along it faded to a slow pulse. The market slowly returned to its normal noise, as if someone had closed a book and moved on. But a change had happened. Lina kept feeling the echo of her last note in her chest. It felt like a promise and a warning at the same time. That night, Lina lay on a thin cot in a safe room that smelled of salt and old blankets. The city hummed outside like a sleeping machine. She thought of her grandmother's hands and of the way the rusted door had glowed. She thought of the woman's words and the uniformed man's voice. Somewhere beyond the sky, a ship older than the memory of many worlds had heard the song. Something had begun to wake. Lina closed her eyes and pressed her fingers to her mouth. Where the tune lived, she had sung a signal without meaning to. The world was quieter now, but not safe. Her life had stepped into a new sound, loud, wide, and not entirely hers. They put Lina in a transport crate, as if she were a spare part. The crate smelled of oil and metal, and the kind of dust that gathers in old corners. Ren walked beside it with a face that tried to look calm. He kept glancing at the sky feed on a small holla. The feed showed a thin blip far above the city. The blip moved like someone turning a key. Lina pressed her palms to the wood. Her throat felt raw from the market song. She did not think she had done anything more than sing. Now the song seemed to come back in ripples. The crate bumped as they threaded through narrow streets. People peered from windows like tired birds. Above them, high, where few people looked, something old turned its engines. On a chart that lived in the cold of empty space, a small warship breathed. It had been built before many stars learned new names. Its hull was scarred and polite, the way old weapons are polite until they are not. When the signal touched it, a pattern of sound hidden in Lina's few notes, its systems answered. Inside the ship, light spread under decks like dawn. Systems that had slept for generations woke in order. A navigation array hummed. A relay read the pattern of Lina's song and called it a directive older than law. The ship did not ask who say. It only followed the command stored deep in its memory. Far from human streets, at an alien consulate carved into black stone, a diplomat watched the same blip. His species listened with whole faces, parts that moved like leaves. The pattern of lights that the ship sent back matched a record they had kept in secret places. He felt a cold beginning in his chest, the small heat of fear that becomes fire. He tapped his communicator with a long finger. "Prepare," he said into the line that could make oceans of ink dry up. No one on his world smiled. No one said Lina's name. They only moved like a single thought. Back in the city, small fighters passed overhead. They were not warships, too small and hungry for glory. Their wings threw shadows like hands. Someone shouted in a language Lina did not know, and the words sounded like worry. The transport crate rattled. Lina gripped the wood. She thought of her grandmother's thin smile, and how the old woman had taught the song like it was keeping a window shut. Ren kept his voice small. "We go to the relay station," he told her. "They will decide what to do." He did not say the rest. The ship in orbit could change everything. Lina swallowed and let the world tilt around her. At the relay station, men and women with tired eyes watched data scroll in like rain. The station had once been proud. Now it smelled of burnt coffee and late nights. A technician replayed the pattern Lina had sung. The waveform looked like a hand on a map. Someone in the room said, "It calls home." No one laughed. Across the sea of stars, other governments and guilds noticed the ship waking. Old treaties that had rested under dust woke with it. Small fleets that had shown little interest in human affairs before now turned their heads. The galaxy remembered history like a bruise. Some remembered how humans had vanished in a way that made legends for the brave. Others remembered only pain. Ren found Lina a quiet corner and tried to explain the danger. If that ship answers fully, they will think we have a fleet again, he said. Many will want control. Many will want to stop us. He looked at her like a man holding a fragile vase. We must move fast. Lina listened, but the words seemed to come from a long hall. She kept seeing the ship's lights in her mind, like small stars arranging themselves into a face. She had not wanted to wake anything. Now she felt the stir of something enormous and slow. A transmission came in with an alien seal. It moved like ice across the console. The message was not angry. It was careful. We note the response. It said, "We will observe." Observing was a promise that did not comfort anyone. Outside, crowds gathered under the relay's low archways. News moved faster than truth. Some shouted that Lina was a weapon. Others called her a savior. A few merchants counted the coins they had already made. News is a sharp blade. It cuts both ways. That night, Lina lay in a small room with a thin mattress and a window that showed a slice of sky. The blip in orbit had become a faint pulse. It felt like a heartbeat at a great distance. She pressed her fingers to her throat where the song had lived. The tune felt small and very large, like a stone the sea had worn smooth. Far above, the old ship sent a single beacon. The beacon was a light and a call. It said, simply, that it had heard. The call ran like a cold wire through space and hit ears that had not listened for a long time. Governments stirred. Mercenaries checked their weapons. Old enemies rubbed their eyes and opened old files. In the dark of her room, Lina thought of the woman who had touched her shoulder in the market and said, "You woke a thing that remembers us." Lina tried to imagine what that remembering would look like. Would it bring friends? Would it bring chains? The next day, small ships arrived at the edges of the system. Not all came with swords. Some came with quiet faces and envoys who smelled of perfumes from other stars. A message came to the relay station offering parley. An envoy called for Lina to be brought forward as proof of peace. Ren looked at that message and felt the room tilt. "They will want to use you as a key," he said, "or as a shield." His jaw tightened like a wire dot. Lina had thought herself a singer with no power. She had only wanted a coin and a warm meal. Now she felt like a note held between many teeth. The ship in orbit pulsed again, small and patient. It had answered a call. It remembered. Now the galaxy had to answer back. She stood in the hallway of the relay station and watched a small council argue under lights that blamed each other for decisions. Lina did not know what the right choice was. She only knew the song had opened a path into the sky, and once a path is open, people will walk it, for glory, for fear, for power, or for trying to keep what is left of peace. The echo of her voice rolled up through the dome and did not stop. It met metal, and metal answered. The game in the stars had new players. Lina stood at its center like a fragile lantern. She did not know whether she would warm the world or burn it. She only knew the next choice mattered. News moved fast once the capital heard the blip. A palace that had slept on soft pillows now woke with hard plans. The emperor lived in tall rooms with many windows. People in those rooms spoke in careful words and thin smiles. They did not shout. They did not need to. Orders slid down like cold silk and soldiers answered with quiet feet. In a smaller room under the palace, the emperor's advisor read the reports. He had a face like a folded map. His eyes were sharp and calm. When he saw the shape of the signal, the song pattern that woke the old ship, he smiled a slow, dangerous smile. "This is not noise," he said to a man who wrote laws. "This is a key. Humans are the key. If we hold the key, we hold the lock." They opened old books. Pages that had not been looked at for generations showed designs for a weapon and for peace. Both lived in the same books. The advisor liked the idea of control. Control kept crowns from slipping. An envoy was chosen. She arrived not by Warship, but by a small ship painted with flowers and true silver. Her name was Lady Sauron. She wore clothes that moved like calm water. Her voice was smooth as a promise. She smiled at everyone and kept her eyes like a secret. She stepped out beneath the palace gates, and the crowd bowed, because the city still liked the sound of power. Sauron smelled of citrus and ink. Her ship's engines whispered. She carried a small box wrapped in velvet. Inside the box, she said, were assurances. Inside the box, she promised, was a safe path for Lina. Ren watched the envoy from a distance. He did not trust smiles that carried velvet. He had fought smaller wars. He had read the faces of men who liked to shave with other men's fortunes. He sat in the relay station and tried to count possible moves. The list made his hands ache. Offer peace, Ren said to the council. Offer a hand. Make them promise. He pointed to the envoy's message. It read like a song. Come with us, and no harm will touch you. Or hand her over, a general said. His fingers drummed on the table. A living human singer is proof. They will march once they have proof. We make a trade. The ship becomes ours. The council argued, and the city outside grew louder. Some cried for safety. Some cried for freedom. Merchants put up prices. Rumors burned like paper. Lina sat on a bench by a small window. She watched the stars like cold coins. Her song lived inside her throat like a bird. People spoke about her as if she were a thing to be moved. They spoke of treaties, of fleets, of bargains. No one asked if Lina wanted any of that. Lady Sauron's envoy asked for Lina gently. We bring safety, Sauron said, when she finally met Lina. Her hands were small and warm. Her voice was softer than rain. Come with us. The Emperor promises you shelter, food, and protection. You will be safe in the palace. Lina looked at the small box. It was beautiful. The velvet was soft under her fingers. Inside there were papers sealed with wax. The papers had the Emperor's mark. They looked like very old promises. Ren saw danger in the smooth way the envoy moved. They will use you, he said later in the night. They will present you as the key to wake their fleet, or they will lock you in the palace and study the song until they own it. His voice was rough with worry. The small group that guarded Lina split into two kinds of people. One wanted to send her with the envoy and get the safety the palace promised. The other wanted to hide her and run. Lina listened and felt the weight of both choices sit on her shoulders. On the day she was to decide, banners flew above the relay station. A messenger from the palace arrived with a new offer. It promised honors and a place in the palace gardens. The letter smelled like jasmine. The words were clever, but the city had mouths everywhere. A trader hid in a workshop and watched. He liked coins. He liked the safe life. He liked the idea of reward. When he saw the envoy's seal, he made a note and slipped it under a table. He sent that note to a ship that flew low in the night. That night, Lina stood by the gate and watched the palace lights. She thought of her grandmother's hands and the tune that had fit like a key. She had sung for bread, not for crowns. Now crowns wanted the sound. A small party came to fetch Lina for the journey to the palace. Lady Sauron stepped close and offered her an arm. Trust me, she said. Her voice was warm and the arm was steady. The palace promised safety. The relay station promised protection. People around Lina's bench wanted a quick solution. Ren could see a net closing. He tried to push Lina away from the gate and into a hidden van. He whispered a plan to run. We leave tonight, he said. We take a small ship. We move before the envoy can carry your name into the palace. Lina looked at Ren, then at the lady, then at the palace lights. The night felt like a bowl full of choices. Sailors below the docks sang a song about leaving. A child nearby started to hum one of Lina's lines. The sound was small and brave. Before anyone could make a final move, The palace sent a fleet of scouts, low and fast. Their wings cut the sky, and their radios spoke in sharp tones. The trader's note had done its work. A secure squad sealed the relay station's exits. Soldiers moved like shadows and sealed doors. The envoy's smile did not change. Ren felt. His hand squeezed the bench. He looked at Lina with tired eyes. They lied, he said, though he did not know how. The palace had closed a net already. Lina stood and felt hands touch her shoulders. These hands were not soft. They were firm and certain. Soldiers moved past with ropes and a promise of safety that tasted like iron. Lady Saren lifted her chin. "We go as friends," she said. Her words were honey over steel. As the group walked toward the waiting ship, alarms sang in the distance. A small fighter flashed overhead. The palace's true plans moved like a shadow behind the envoy's velvet. Lina felt the song like a rope, pulling her one way and a wind pulling another. At the ship's ramp, Ren made one last choice. He stepped forward, and for a breath the night held like a closed fist. Then the soldiers closed in. The ramp lifted with a soft hiss, and the ship's engines whispered awake. From the palace windows, a slow light blinked and order, sent to distant hunters, who now turned their engines toward the city. The throne had noticed. It was deciding how loud it would answer back. Lina looked at the sky. She thought of the song, and of the ship that had already answered it. She thought of the Emperor's books, and the advisor's folded map face. Her eyes found the stars, and her hands found the velvet box. She had to choose. The world around her had already started to choose for her. The next move would change more than one life. The throne was ready to speak. The galaxy waited for the answer. The city smelled of rain and metal. People moved like tired rivers. Lina stood on a low rail platform and watched faces. They were not soldiers. They were bakers, dockhands, old teachers, and a few strange aliens with soft mouths. None of them had a uniform. All of them had something to lose. Ren stood beside her. He had tired lines around his eyes now. He still kept watching the sky. "We do not have a fleet," he said. "We only have truth. We must use it right." Lina touched the small scar on her hand. The scar itched when she was nervous. She thought of her grandmother's song and of the way it had opened old metal. The song had become more than a tune. People called it the signal. People also used other names. Some called it a key. Lina wanted none of those names. She wanted to live. The first meeting took place in a cellar below an old bakery. The light was weak and warm. A man who used to be a pilot tapped a table with a chipped cup. A woman who once served as a diplomat folded her hands. An alien with fingers like glass clicked a rhythm on the table. They all looked at Lina as if she were a map. "We will not turn the ship into a weapon," said the diplomat. Her voice was soft but sure. "We will use it as a shield. We will show the galaxy that humans can return and not bring only war." A baker laughed once. It was a small sound full of salt. "We will sing together," he said. "Music is not a gun." His eyes shone with a brave warmth. Others nodded. The alien tapped a pattern on the table that sounded like a heartbeat. They all began to hum quietly. Lina felt the tune rise like steam. Word spread fast. People came from alleys and small docks. They brought old tools, broken radios, and bright hope. They did not have soldiers. They had voices. They practiced the song for hours. They added small beats, a drum made from a crate, a pipe that whistled like wind. The song changed and grew. It became a chorus. Ren taught them to move without making lines. "Armies march," he told them. "A chorus moves like a river." He put people in small groups. Some learned to sing low and steady. Others learned to make the new parts that fit like hands on a lock. Lina watched and found her voice stronger. People listened differently when many voices joined. The old ship above answered by showing patterns of light. It did not fire. It waited. For some, waiting felt like power. For others, it felt like a long knife. Not everyone trusted the chorus idea. A band of mercenaries offered to sell muscle. "You want strength?" they asked. "Pay us." Their leader had a flat voice and a quick smile. The council that formed refused. "We will not buy what we cannot keep," the diplomat said. "We will be the thing we need." As the days moved, the chorus held small rallies in safe squares. People sang the song and held candles. The city watched. Some wept, some cheered. A child who had earlier cried in the market stood near Lina now, humming the low part. Lina felt something shift. The song was no longer a secret in her throat. It had become a promise that many mouths kept. But the throne did not sleep. Behind velvet and gardens, men who counted power like coins watched every move. They sent a quiet knife through the city. A man in a workshop who had once fixed radios wrote a message and sent it on a clothesline. He had wanted a life with steady pay. He had wanted to be safe. The promise of reward was simple and bright. He betrayed them. That night, a small transmitter near the harbor blinked. The trader's message told distant ears one thing: lock the song. The message was short. It carried a code that the throne's agents had learned from old books. It told a machine far above to close. It was not a loud order. It was a careful click. At the next rally, the chorus gathered by the river. Lanterns swung, and voices rose. Lina stepped forward to sing the heart note. The crowd fell quiet. The sound moved through them like warm air. Lina began, and the chorus joined. The music grew like a tide above them. The old ship answered with a bright line. The pattern that had been their sign now opened a small hatch. That hatch was a mercy, or a test. The hymn spread, and many hands lifted. Then the lights on the ship stuttered. For a breath the pattern broke. A silence hit the square like a hard hand. The trader's code had reached an ancient lock on the ship's control. The lock engaged. The song that once fit the ship like a key now hit a slow wall. The chorus felt the change. The music felt small and stuck. People looked up, fearful and confused. Ren shouted over the sudden silence, "It is a trap." His voice cut like flint. Soldiers moved through side alleys with quiet feet. They closed roads. Lady Saren's agents, who had slipped away from the palace, moved like shadows and took names. The trader's reward was already paid. Chaos spread quickly. The rulers used the moment to declare emergency. They promised safety in return for order. Some who feared lost their will to resist. Others stood firm with burning eyes. Lina felt the weight of betrayal like a cold stone. She had wanted the chorus to protect people, not to lead them into a net. She closed her eyes and sang anyway. Her voice was small at first. Then others joined, slower and steadier. The song refused to die. It found small cracks in the silence and slipped through. In the cellar later, the council counted losses. A small team of singers had been taken in the raid. A transmitter was dark. The ship above glowed in an odd, quiet way. Someone said the word locked, and the sound felt like defeat. Ren placed a hand on Lina's shoulder. "They tried to stop the song with fear," he said. "We must not answer with the same thing." His fingers were steady. Lina opened her mouth and hummed a low note. It joined the small radio in the corner, which picked up a stranger's voice. An old ally in a remote system answered with a map and a promise of shelter. The chorus had lost a battle. The throne had shown a hidden blade, but the song lived. It could be small or loud. It could be used as a key or used as a lock. Lina understood something hard in that moment. People would now try to use her voice for their gain. She had to choose how to let that happen. The city was bruised but not broken. The chorus regrouped under dark roofs and quiet lights. They planned not only to sing but to move. The ship above waited with its hatch half closed. The throne had struck a secret blow. The next move would decide if the chorus could turn the strike into fuel for a larger fire. The capital smelled of smoke and perfume. Flags that once looked proud now hung heavy and wet. Lina stood on the deck of the old ship as it moved through the sky like a slow storm. Below, buildings leaned away from the noise. People looked up, with faces that were tired and sharp. The ship's lights showed a map. The pattern Lina and the chorus had learned became a key at the ship's heart. It opened more than a hatch. It opened memory, old logs and pictures and names that had been kept from the public for years. The ship did not wake to fight. It woke to tell the truth. Ren stood beside Lina. His face was dirt-marked and serious. He had not slept. He had seen too many plans fall apart and too many people betrayed. "We can end this with words," he said, "or with fire." "I prefer words." Lina looked at the city below. The palace sat at its center, like a crown. The emperor watched from high rooms where the world seemed smaller. He had sent hunters before. Now he gathered his best men and his worst secrets. The advisor with the folded map face stood near him, smiling like a knife. On the ship, a screen showed images the world had never seen. It showed cities the palace had burned in secret. It showed shipments of food that never reached the hungry. It showed letters from leaders who begged for mercy and were ignored. The ship read the song as an order to reveal. Lina's voice trembled once, then steadied. The chorus joined her on the ship, and through hidden relays their sound carried out like a tide. The pattern spoke to machines that had listened for long ages. Doors opened in the palace as if the building chose to answer the truth. At first, the emperor tried to shut it down. He ordered the city to block broadcasts and to cut power. Soldiers ran through alleys with orders to silence the ship. The palace screens went black for a heartbeat. But the ship had already pushed the truth out on many old channels. The images and the proofs moved faster than men with guns. People in the city watched the images and felt something hard break inside them. They saw names they knew on lists of people taken. They saw their own money in ledgers that showed where it had gone. The truth does not always heal, but it changes who holds power. Lady Saren moved through palace halls like a ghost. She tried to bargain and to soothe. Her box of promises felt empty now that the ship had shown paper that could not be fixed with velvet. The emperor's advisor dropped his pen as the proof stared at him from 100 screens. He looked small. Outside the palace, a crowd gathered that did not need much to push. The chorus on the ship sang louder. Their voices were not polite. They were raw and steady. Lina kept the central line, the old memory tune that had first woken the door under the market. She turned it into a new line, one that opened locked data and spoke names aloud. Soldiers who had followed the emperor's orders began to listen. Some covered their faces, some lowered their weapons. A few of them looked at the images, and then at their own hands, and could not find reason to strike their neighbors. The emperor tried one last thing. He called for a hidden bolt inside the ship's code, a weapon built into old times. He meant to make the ship a weapon and set it to burn the capital if the truth spilled. The advisor fed the code into a small console. Ren saw the move and ran. He tackled the advisor, and they wrestled on the floor of the ship's control room. Sparks flew. Wires broke. The console flashed a red warning. Lina watched Ren fall back with a hard breath. The advisor had a knife tucked in his boot. He lunged, and the blade caught Ren's arm. Ren grunted. Blood warmed the deck. Lina did not scream. She sang. There are moments when a voice is all a person can give. Lina put her pain into the tune and changed the pattern. She did not sing to open a door. She sang to close a wound. The ship listened. Its old circuits were more like ears than fists. The tune bent the ship's will away from violence and toward memory. The red warning faded. The weapon did not fire. The advisor fell silent and the knife clattered on the metal. Ren was hurt, but alive. He smiled with a tired, brave face. You always did your best work with your throat, he said. Lina touched his hand and felt the steady pulse. Outside, the palace gates unlocked. The emperor walked into a square that no longer feared him. He had words ready, but there were screens showing what he had done. People did not listen to his promises when proof lived in light. The crowd moved forward like slow water. They did not need to kill. They needed to remove a throne that would not answer the truth. Soldiers put down their weapons and walked into the crowd. The emperor found himself surrounded by faces that had once bowed. Now those faces asked questions, and the man had no answers. When the emperor fell not to a blade but to the weight of his own lies, his crown rolled in the dust. It looked foolish there. The advisor was taken by his own guards, who had stomachs full of light and conscience. Lady Soren hid in the crowd and watched a world she had tried to shape slip from her fingers. After the fall, silence came like a thick cloth. It was not complete. People cried and shouted and sang the chorus. Lina stood on the ship's deck and listened to the city breathe. The ship had given them truth. The people had decided what to do with it. Ren leaned on the rail and watched. The palace. We toppled the throne, he said. But what stands after a throne falls is always the hard part. Lina looked at the faces in the square. Some were bright with hope. Some had eyes that knew new fear. She felt the cost. Friends had been hurt. Some had been taken. The city had a long road to healing. She thought of her grandmother's hands, and the lullaby that became a key. She had not wanted power. She wanted safety. Now the song had changed the shape of the galaxy. Humans were no longer a story for others to tell. They had a voice. That voice could build or break. Lina stepped down from the ship and into a crowd that welcomed her and pushed at her like a tide. She did not smile like a queen. She moved with a tired, careful step. She had sung a signal that toppled a throne. The sky looked different now. The world would not be the same. But Lina still had her small metal cup in her pocket. She kept it, like a promise. The chorus continued to sing. The city began to clear away the ashes and the lies. They had used truth as a tool and not as a weapon. That was their first and hardest choice. In the end, the song that began as a lullaby had become a wake-up call. The throne had fallen. The galaxy was awake. Lina closed her eyes and let the chorus lift her voice once more, not as a key, but as a promise to try to do better.